Welcome to the Better Together podcast, where we look for ways we can work together to advance the gospel of Jesus Christ. Today we have with us Tom Jones. He's a former pastor, former church planter, but he's joining us today because he's a licensed professional counselor, and he's what I call the workhorse behind the Refresh Counseling Program. And so you may be listening to us today, maybe for the first time, and you don't know about the Refresh Counseling Program, but we have over 8 helping professionals that work with our pastors, work with their wives, wherever they may be, primarily via online format to help them with their situations. And Tom, you have conducted more than 1,000 counseling sessions with pastors or their wives. And so I want to thank you for doing that good work for us, buddy, and helping us along in such a wonderful way. So you listeners may not be aware, but we'll have pastors tell us, I wouldn't be in the ministry without the counseling program. And especially with Tom, they talk about having a listening ear, having someone that's been part of the ministry, understands where they're coming from. And so, Tom, you may not know this, but I hear a whole lot of feedback about you, and it's all good, buddy. You've been so helpful to our pastors and our wives. So thank you for that, my friend.
Thank you. Eddie, I was thinking this morning on the drive to the office. It's about a 10-minute drive from my house to the office. And I asked my girls and Pam to pray for me today that it wouldn't be too weepy in this podcast. I'm very passionate about this. I just can't thank God enough for the joy that I have to be able to sit in this chair every day and talk with these folks. I love it. I love it.
Well, you know, you're a joy to us, and especially to me, Tom. You know how the program started. It started out of a tragedy.
Yes, sir.
And, you know, in those early days, I was trying to work with people, and most of the time, I feel like I was in an airport. And so now I feel like we're able to, okay, we've got these options for you. And so many people, when I mentioned that you're an opportunity, and I will say, we had a fellow try to take his life, and went to visit him in the hospital. And I said, did you know that we've got a counseling program and Tom Jones is part of it? And he said, oh, Tom. He said, I would gladly participate in that. So you being who you are and taking the time to get yourself trained, and wow, what a road it's been. So our listeners are thinking to themselves, what can I do? I'm hoping they're thinking this, at least, Tom. What can I do to support my pastor? Because you've heard in over 1,000 counseling sessions with just our pastors and themselves, you're hearing a lot of their needs. And there's a whole lot that the people sitting out there in the pew or the chair, there's a lot they can do to help and support their pastor. So how about sharing that, a little bit of that with us today? I'm a lay person. I'm there in my congregation. My pastor's under a lot of pressure. What can they do to step up and help their pastor?
Well, some of it may sound a little cliche, because some of it we've talked about really for years, but I don't know that people often really understand the value of it. One of the things, Eddie, that I hear so much from pastors, and even today, as I was working with some, what I hear, I tell folks I could take this person out of their story and plug somebody else in, and the story is going to continue very much the same. And you know that. But a lot of it is pastors feel so alone. They feel so isolated. They feel like they're working hard, and I believe they are, but they're not seeing the growth. They're not seeing just the growth that they would like to see. So I think one of the things, obviously, we want to pray for our pastors, that we know, but I think it's important to come and walk along beside our pastor. What I mean by walk along beside them, I don't mean get in the pulpit and preach with them. I mean just encourage them, give them words of encouragement, let them know how much they're appreciated. I don't think people do it on purpose, but I do think that there's times that folks will, they will come to the pastor if they have an issue or a complaint. And pastors don't have a problem with that, but they sure do want to hear some encouragement once in a while, and let them know that they're not alone. And quite frankly, I think they could encourage their pastors to be involved in this program, in the Refresh Counseling Program, because I think sometimes they think their people will think they're weak if they know they're in counseling. And I tell folks all the time, I think when I see somebody doing this, I admire them. think they're being,
Yeah.
I think they're being very strong. So I think that's a couple of practical things that they
Let's
can
stop
do.
right there for just a minute, Tom, and I'll come back to you. But you just said a lot of stuff I really think we need to unpack. So the first thing you said is that as a in a congregation, we often bring up something to a pastor, something that often does need to be brought up or
Sure.
dealt with. But I'm almost going to say to our listeners, if you bring something up and it's got a little bit of a negative connotation,
Mhm.
maybe you want to bring up some positive things too.
Yeah, buddy.
And maybe for it's almost, John Gottman did this in a marriage. Basically, he said for every negative thing, it's going to take like 10 positive things. And so
Mhm.
I hear you saying this all the time, Tom. Tell your pastor what you appreciate. And so that's the first
Absolutely.
thing you kind of mentioned there. If we unpack that, so you said, yes, pray for them. The
Mhm.
next thing you said is give them affirmation. And then you were like, hey, it's okay for counseling
Mhm.
and to encourage that. Take it
Mhm.
on further, brother. I know you've got so many thoughts.
Sure. Well, going back to what you said about the way you say it, I work with folks all the time. God pointed out a text to me. Oh goodness, it's been several months ago now. Proverbs 25:11. A word fitly spoken is
Yes.
like apples of gold in a setting of silver. There's words that might be okay, but is it fitly spoken for the moment? So a lot of time it's the tone, it's how things are said, it's the way it's said. So absolutely with that. I know personally.
When it's said too, right, Tom?
I'm sorry.
When it's said
And
too,
when
right?
it said the timing of it. Yeah.
Not before the sermon.
Yeah, not before the sermon or even after the sermon.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times the pastors are kind of beating themselves up after a sermon because they think about what they didn't say or what they may have said wrong. And that time frame is a time that unless you have been a pastor, you don't really fully understand what that is. Yeah, but definitely not right before the sermon. Schedule a time with the pastor. Be considerate of his time, because not only does he have the congregation to take care of, he also has his family to take
Yes.
care of.
Yes.
And he's hungry after church too, and he's going
Yes.
to go eat with his family. So maybe that's not the best timing. So yes, I think the timing is so critically important. But again, is checking on them, making sure they're okay. We're accustomed to the pastor checking on us. It's checking on them. I had one of our ladies some years ago, the first church that I started here in our family started here in the Pittsburgh area. I was having, it turned out it was anxiety, but I thought it was health issues. And she said to me one day, she said, I just never think about the pastor getting sick. So people don't think about that. People don't think about the pastor getting tired. And a lot of pastors I'm talking to, they're tired.
Yeah.
They feel burned out, but they're tired, they're worn out, and a lot of what they're carrying is what they hear from folks.
Mm-hmm.
Pastors tend to believe, well, folks are feeling this way just because I'm a bad pastor. I just don't think that God has put all bad pastors in Free Will Baptist. I don't buy that. I think that we've got some great pastors.
Mm.
So speak words of encouragement to them. And listen, quite frankly, another thing, great things churches can do is they can support this program. When I say support the program, I'm not just talking about talk about it. I'm talking about financially support it.
Yeah.
I'm talking about to make sure that their pastor is able to get the help that they're looking for. So
Mm-hmm.
again, those are just some practical things that I think that they can do,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe take the pastor out to lunch once in a while.
Very good.
What can I do? What can I do to help you?
Yeah. So you're saying look at the pastor as a person. We
Yes, sir.
often put the pastor up on a pedestal. We think that
Absolutely.
they don't have maybe the same kind of feelings. They've got the same concerns. What I hear you saying is that everybody else has.
Mm-hmm.
So we remember them at particular
Mm-hmm.
times, just like
Mm-hmm.
we would want to be remembered,
Mm-hmm.
and those things as well.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got the pastor. You're also, and we have in our program a lot of wives of pastors as
Yes,
well
we
that
do.
we're working with. So, as someone's listening, what can they do to support a pastor's wife?
I think some of the same type of things that you do to support a pastor, you support a pastor's wife. You
Mm.
let her know. You let her know how much you appreciate her. I think a lot of time. I've had folks tell me, I've had some folks that have the real gift of encouragement, I think, through the years. But, I've had folks, I think they say it jokingly, but there's some truth. Hey, look, we love your wife. We tolerate you, but we love
Yes.
your wife. And I'm blessed with such an incredible pastor's wife, Pam. Just people love her, and I'm so thankful for that. But again, come along beside them and check on them and see how they're doing. And remember this, that pastors, I'm thinking of this is not a Free Will Baptist that I'm working with, but the pastor's wife, it's their first pastorate, and she talks to me about how it hurts her to watch her husband hurt by things that are said to him when she sees him get down. And so pastors' wives also watch what their husband goes through. And so being careful of what you say, how you say it, when you say it, and don't expect them to do it all. So pastors, especially church planters, I remember this when we started out. Of course, you don't oftentimes in church planting, you don't have that big of a group oftentimes to work with. And the pastor's wife winds up doing so much of the stuff. Again, remembering that her children are small, the children are children. Yes, they're the pastor's children, but they're children. And they're not, and pastor children are not going to act perfectly. They're not going to be that perfect little angel and sit there. They're just children being in church. And so come along, walk beside them, encourage them, send them notes and cards. I will say this too, Eddie. One thing I've heard pastors say, while they appreciate Pastor Appreciation Month, for some, it can almost feel like checking off a box.
Yeah.
Of fulfilling an obligation. You get what I mean by that?
Yes, absolutely.
And so it's kind of like if you only buy your wife flowers on her anniversary, maybe it doesn't feel that special as opposed to if you just buy her flowers. And Pam hears this, she's going to expect me to start doing that. But to buy flowers for no reason. Right. And so to show appreciation at times that aren't necessarily expected.
That you don't have to do it. So
you don't have to do it. It's not obligation. It's because you want to do it. I love when my grandkids hug me, but I want them to do it because they want to, not because their mom and dad saying, hey, go over and give Pap a hug.
Absolutely. And we all do. So that's some great information there. So one, pastor's wife can't separate the way you treat her husband from a relationship with her. So think about that. And remember, I mean, would you want someone to talk poorly about your husband or your wife if they want to be buddies? That's just not the way it works. You also mentioned that every pastor's wife is different. Some of them do a lot of things. Some of them are more introverted and do less. I love also what you mentioned about, like, especially young pastors and young pastors' wives. Wow. Imagine and remember what that was difficult when they have newborns and they're trying to juggle all that. And sometimes they're doing it for the first time. And maybe we look and think, is there a burden? Is there something that I can lift? I can help with them. That's good stuff there, Tom. Real helpful.
And I think one final thing too, Eddie, on that is be careful of the expectations placed on them. And remembering the pastor's human, the pastor's wife is human, the pastor's children are human. One of my favorite scriptures is when Moses they were fighting the Amalekites. And Joshua said, choose men. I'm going to go up on the hill. It looked like he could be avoiding the battle. Yeah. He really had the most important job, was holding the rod above his head, but he got tired.
Yes.
Aaron and Hur helped him. They gave him a rock to sit on, and they grabbed him by the wrist and held his wrist up. That's what it takes, because the objective is for the word of God to be preached in our churches. And it's hard for worn out, unhealthy pastors to continuously do that on a regular basis. And people pouring into them. And it doesn't have to be anything extravagant. Just an occasional, hey, I appreciate you. I love you, Pastor. Thank you so much. That really feeds them.
So if I really take that analogy further, the Aaron and Hur situation, they're watching, they can see what's happening with Moses, and they stepped in.
Absolutely.
And so if I'm in a congregation, I'm watching. I'm not just thinking about myself or my own needs or desires. I'm looking and thinking, what can I do to help?
Yes, sir.
And often it can be encouragement, but often it's an act. What are actions I can perform to help?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Words only go so far. Words go so far. but words don't help get the work done.
There you go. That's
Mm-hmm.
great. So it's not just congregants, it's other pastors. And this may seem strange to, if you're a pastor and you're listening, you're like, well, hey, I've got my own stuff that I'm dealing with. And why should I be concerned with other pastors? But there are things that pastors can do to help other pastors that maybe no one else can do, aren't there, Tom?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I think one of that is that if you know of a brother that's struggling, and listen, I know pastors are busy.
Mm-hmm.
Pastors, and I hear that a lot from guys that the guys that the pastors that I'm working with, especially certain times of the year, they're just busy. But again, it's being aware as fellow pastors, being aware of what our brother might be experiencing, and again, just checking on him. Mm-hmm. One of the things that I do hear from pastors is that sometimes they don't feel checked in on by their friends. And another important thing they can do is they can be a place for that one pastor to talk. That they can get together and know that it'll feel safe. That's one of the things that I heard it just today. That one of the things that seemed very valuable to a pastor is him talking about some things that were hard to talk about. Yeah. He said, Tom, I'm thankful that we have this where we know that we can come and talk. It's a safe place. You're not going to criticize. You're not going to condemn. Mm-hmm. And so how can we support one another and be there for one another? Or it might be, Eddie, and we've had this. We have experienced this where we have a pastor who's in a literal crisis. Yeah. We ask another pastor to go, and that's in the proximity that can physically be there, and they can actually go and be boots on the ground, if you will, and actually be there in person with that brother. I think that's something important that they can do.
Excellent. So let's walk through that a little bit. So just like you as pastors, you check on people in your congregation. You send them texts on their birthday. You send them text on the anniversary of someone's death. Mm-hmm. What you're saying, Tom, is send a text, send a social media direct message to a pastor. You see him post something, you sense something's a little off. And I think also by checking, I think I've heard you say things like, hey, invite them out if you're close enough to breakfast, or do something with them. That's good stuff.
Yeah.
The other thing
for coffee, something simple.
Yes, something simple, right? And then you talked about listening, being a listening ear that you're hearing a lot from folks, and keeping it confidential, and how helpful that is. It's just a wonderful thing. You mentioned some of our fellows who've helped us with people who were in crisis. They had to get their hands dirty, didn't they, Tom?
Yes. Oh, yeah. Yeah, and that's not a pleasant thing to do. It's not a fun thing. It's not pleasant to watch your brother hurt. Mm-mm. It's not. It's hard.
Yeah.
It hurts. But the Bible talks to us about that. Mm-hmm. The Bible talks to us that two is better than one, because if one stumbles, the other one can pick him up. You know, who knows? It might be me that's in the crisis next time.
Yes.
Needing or wanting somebody to be there. So getting your hands dirty and doing things that are inconvenient and things that are not pleasant. But this is what I tell our guys and the wives: you're worth it.
Absolutely.
You're worth the effort. You're worth the time. You're worth the cost of this program, because we love you, and so even if I'm doing something unpleasant, go do it, because I think that's what God calls us to do for one another.
That's great. And so something bad happens, somebody, in any number of things happen from time to time. Often people will be like, if I had only known, or sometimes I would have done anything. Well, this is the thing. We do want to sometimes think, what could be the eventuality of this situation if I don't intervene, or if I'm not there to help out?
Sure.
And so we want to do it on the front end. And like you say, we've had situations where people have done that. Boy, the heartache that is saved when people step up. And so pastors get it like nobody else, don't they, Tom?
Yeah, Eddie, and I was thinking as you were saying that too, I think sometimes people are hesitant to go walk with a brother because they don't necessarily feel like they know what to do. Sometimes just simply somebody else being present makes
Yes.
all the difference. I've said this about when Job went through what he went through, his friends came to be with him, and they only became miserable comforters once they started to speak to him. So
That's right.
sometimes just going there and physically being present, that brother knows that he's not walking all alone. It
That's
speaks
right.
volumes. Sometimes the most fitly spoken word is no word at all.
There you
Just
go. That's
simply
great.
being there.
So just going, the power of presence, being with
Mhm.
them, being willing to listen, and it shows you care for that person.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I agree.
Well, you've given us a whole lot to think about and to put into practice, Tom. So you say, hey, it's not just for Pastor Appreciation Month or Pastor's Wife Appreciation Month. Really, we need to practice taking care of pastors, taking care of each other year round, don't we?
An attitude of pastor appreciation.
Oh, that's great.
An attitude of it. And, Eddie, we all know this. Since COVID, things have changed. People are different. I believe that during COVID, people went into their brain stems to survive. And in the brainstem and survival mode, there's not a lot of feeling. It's all about me. And people just don't treat people like they used to. And I think with our climate of our world, that's continued by and large. And even in the church, we're just not as kind to one another as we used to be. Pastors aren't as kind to one another as they used to be. And we have to get back to that. We have to get back, because if the shepherd stops sharing the word, how does the word get shared?
Absolutely.
So it's so important. So important.
Very good. Well, good words there, Tom. And I know you're a busy man. So I think I sent someone to you today and yesterday.
Yes,
So
yes, sir. Yes,
so I
sir.
want you to
I've got
hop
some
back
reaching
to
out
that.
to do.
Thanks. Thank you for what you're doing, brother. I appreciate it greatly. And I know our listeners appreciate it, and so many others. And we appreciate you all that took the time to listen to us today. And we encourage you to look for ways to put some of what the wisdom Tom has given us, put some of that in practice. Every little bit counts. And so when we work together for the Lord, we can accomplish so much more because we truly are better together. Thank you for taking the time to join us today.